Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the previous episode, which showed how Muhammad, or whoever wrote the Quran, whoever wrote the Islamic narrative, plagiarized the story of Abraham and, of course, made Muhammad into a magician. Now, to continue with Abraham. Eventually, the true creator that Abraham had worshipped called him and made him an offer. If Abraham would leave his home and his family, then Allah would make him a great nation and bless him. The act of hijrah, immigration in Islam, seems to derive itself from this. Now, hijrah, as I mentioned earlier, is technically a form of jihad. Abraham accepted this offer, and the Brit, the covenant between God and the Jewish people, was established. Now, Brit is fundamental to traditional Judaism. So we have a covenant, a contract with rights and obligations between us and God, God and us. So we have certain obligations to God, He has obligations to us, and this becomes more explicit over time, the terms of this contract. So there's a development through history. The terms of this Brit, eventually, at the time of the giving of the Torah, is when the terms of this Brit became more explicit over time, until the time of the giving of the Torah. This would mean the advent of the law of Moses. Abraham was subjected to 10 tests of faith to prove his worthiness for this covenant. Leaving his home is one of these trials. Abraham, raised as a city dweller, adopted a nomadic lifestyle. He traveled through what is now the land of Israel for many years, and God promised this land to Abraham's descendants. Abraham is referred to as a Hebrew, the Ivri, possibly because he was descended from Eber, or because he came from the other side of the Euphrates River. Abraham means exalted father. Abraham means the father of a multitude. Abraham was concerned, though. He had no children, and he was growing old, and Abraham's wife, Sarai, knew that she was past childbearing years, so she offered her maidservant Hagar as a wife to Abraham. This was a common practice in the region at the time, and according to tradition, Hagar was a daughter of Pharaoh, given to Abraham during his travels in Egypt. She bore Abraham a son, Ishmael, who, according to both Muslim and Jewish tradition, is the ancestor of the Arabs. When Abraham was 100 and Sarai 90, God promised Abraham a son by Sarai. So God changed Abraham's name to Abraham, the father of many, and Sarai's to Sarah, from my princess to princess. Sarah bore Abraham a son, Isaac in Hebrew, Yitzhak, a name derived from the word laughter, expressing Abraham's joy at having a son in his old age. That's in Genesis 17 to 18. Isaac was the ancestor of the Jewish people. Abraham dies at the age of 175. Now, let's look at a few points here. Sharia, the Islamic law, makes the explicit claim that Islam is Gnostic. Gnosticism is not a form of religion. It is a form of revision. It is an alternate interpretation of reality. Islam is revisionist. And as I've just said, Islam claims within the Islamic law to be a Gnostic religion. Now, Islam alters the biblical figures and events that stem from earlier traditions. It reinterprets them falsely, as we know. And if we look at the Islamic narrative, these tales are derived from heretical and Gnostic texts. The sources of Islam predate it by hundreds of years. Archaeological discoveries validate the biblical narrative, but not so with the Islamic narrative. Abraham migrated from Mesopotamia, the lower Euphrates Valley, north to Haran. Haran, interestingly, is the name of Abraham's deceased brother. Abraham then traveled to Canaan, later renamed to Israel, and Babylon worshipped numerous gods, and in Haran there was a moon god called Shin, among many other names. This is the standard telling of the story of Abraham's travel. So he goes from down here to Haran, and then to Egypt, and then back into the land of Canaan, now Israel. Hagar and Ishmael. Let's talk about that. So Genesis 21:5, and Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had born unto Abraham, mocking Isaac. She said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. And the thing was very grievous in Abraham's sight because of his son. And God said unto Abraham, Let it not be grievous in thy sight because of the lad, and because of thy bondwoman. In all that Sarah has said unto thee, hearken unto her voice, for in Isaac thy seed shall be called. Notice, not in Ishmael, in Isaac. And also the son of the bondwoman will I make a nation, because he is thy seed. And Abram rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it to Hagar, put it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away, and she departed. And she wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. Now, here's a map of Israel. This is Google Earth. So let's have a look. Let's go to Beersheba. Let's have a look where this is. We wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. That's right here. So let's see. If we draw a little line and we go from Jerusalem to Beersheba, the distance is roughly 68 kilometers. So she wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba around here. This is the Dead Sea. These are the Qumran caves. This is Jerusalem. This is Tel Aviv. And yeah, so this is where apparently she wandered around. Let's continue. The water was spent in the bottle, and she cast her child under one of the shrubs. And she went and sat down against him a good way off, as if it were a bowshot. For she said, Let me not see the death of the child. And she sat over against him, and lifted up her voice, and wept. God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven, and said unto her, What aileth thee, Hagar? Fear not. For God hath heard the voice of the lad where he is. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him in thine hand, for I will make him a great nation. And God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. And of course in Islam, this is the Zamzam well. And she went and filled the bottle with water. So of course, according to the standard Islamic narrative, that would be all the way down here in Mecca. Let's do a quick measurement. So if this is Beersheba here, well, then she went approximately 1,200 kilometers, close enough. So she went to the water, she filled a bottle, and gave the lad drink. And God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. And he dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took him a wife out of the land of Egypt. So again, according to the Islamic narrative, she wandered, well, according to the biblical story, in Beersheba, because we know that Abraham lived in this region here. According to the Islamic tradition, she wandered 1,200 kilometers of primitive desert, of rocky, dangerous, parched, uninhabitable desert. A woman alone with a bottle of water and a small child. She wandered 1,200 kilometers, and then to fetch my wife, she marched all this way back up, another 1,200 kilometers into Egypt, and then she brought the wife back. So yeah, she was pretty good at walking. Now let's continue. This is Beersheba. This is the area of Beersheba, as I noted over here. So this would be that area where she wandered. Here on the bottom right, you can see this on the map. Now, Muslims insist that Hagar made a 1,200 kilometer trek. Dead Sea here, Qumran caves here, Jerusalem just up here to the north, Beersheba. So we're looking at approximately 1,200 kilometers. That's the trip that she took with a bottle of water and this young lad. So let's see. Hebron to Beersheba, right, is 43 kilometers or 27 miles. Jerusalem to Beersheba is 70 kilometers, about 43 miles. So now Abraham died at Hebron, right? And we know he lived in this region. So yeah, did she walk 1,200 kilometers or did she walk 30, 40, 50 kilometers? Let's continue with the Islamic version of Hagar's 1,200 kilometer walk in the desert. So the Islamic view is that Muslims are taught that the well is Zamzam in Mecca. In Makkah. Let's call it Makkah. Hagar and infant Ishmael traveled 1,200 kilometers with one bottle of water on foot across arid, uninhabited, unexplored, harsh desert 1,000 years before there was a major trade route. In the standard Islamic narrative, Abram walks them there. He then leaves them under a tree with some dates and walks back the 1,200 kilometers. Let's have a look at that again. Abraham walks them all the way down here, then walks them all the way back, right? Don't forget Abraham built the Kaaba, but don't forget that Abraham repaired the Kaaba because Adam built the Kaaba, right? And of course, Hagar was parking under a tree where there was no well and no Kaaba, and then she saw the Zamzam well and no Kaaba, and she drank from the well that Abraham had built next to the Kaaba, or something. Well, the Kaaba was built next to the well, which wasn't there because Mecca is the world's oldest city, and Abraham had built the Kaaba, which wasn't there, which Adam had built, which Abraham repaired because Adam built it, because Abraham built it. I don't know. I'm losing my mind. Let's continue. Allah, we find, is very forgetful. Hagar is not mentioned by name in the Quran. No name. Quran is the Hijaz, according to them, right? And she searched for water between Safa and Marwa hills. Let's have a look at Safa and Marwa. So we shall zoom in here to Mecca. As we get close into Mecca, these are the hills Safa and Marwa. Safa and Marwa. The distance between them is approximately 370 meters. So she searched here for water. Now, Muslims specifically tell us that Ishmael's heel, his heel touched the ground, the heel of his foot touched the ground, and it opened up a well of water. And specifically, it was an angel's heel. The angel's heel touched the ground, and it opened up a well of water. And very specifically, the angel's wing, she saw the angel's wing digging. And the angel's wing, Ishmael's heel, the angel's heel, Ishmael's heel was the angel's wing, was the angel's heel, was... And the angel's wing dug the well, specifically. In Quran 14:37, our Lord, I have settled part of my descendants in a barren valley by your sacred house. Well, Hagar forgets to mention that the Kaaba was there. In a barren valley, barren meaning nothing, is there, but Adam built the Kaaba there because Abraham built the Kaaba there much later, because Abraham repaired the Kaaba that was not... That they may maintain the prayer. Now, what is most interesting is that this Islamic narrative is dated at the very earliest in Islamic sources to 827 AD. Now, if Muhammad died in 632, this is 200 years later. It's 195 years after the death of Muhammad. This story does not appear in the Islamic record until 200 years after the death of Muhammad. Let us ask a few questions about this interesting narrative that we're being told by the Islamic scholars. Now, of course, speaking of contradictions, we can ask about these contradictions found between the Hafs Quran and the Warsh Quran, the 37 different Qira'ats, but that's a story for another day. But let us not forget that Abraham traveled all the way from Israel to Mecca. Then he rebuilt the Kaaba, but then he had to smash the idols that had been put inside the Kaaba that he rebuilt. So which came first, the rebuilding or the smashing up of idols in the Kaaba that wasn't there, that he rebuilt, but that was built by Adam, that wasn't there when Hagar was there because there was no well? And yeah, this is hurting my brain. Now, Hagar was running around in the desert. She was looking for water between Marwa and Safa. The Zamzam well was granted to her by Allah. Now, the Zamzam well is 40 meters away from the Kaaba, give or take. Or rather, the ruins, because Abraham rebuilt it. Let's have a look here. Here's the Zamzam well. This is a Google Earth shot of Mecca. This is the Kaaba right here. This is the Zamzam well. You're looking at a distance of roughly 40 meters. So I guess maybe her eyesight was really bad. Maybe Hagar had terrible eyesight and she couldn't see 40 meters because things were different then. You know, conditions were different. Humans didn't have glasses and they couldn't see. But so after that 1,200 kilometer walk, maybe she went blind. So now, anyway, so now this does tell us that the Islamic story is clearly problematic, severely problematic. This means that there could not be a Mecca at that time, especially when she was close to the Kaaba and she was in the desert, because the Islamic story tells us she was in the desert, but she's supposed to be next to the Kaaba, which is, yeah, we've already covered the problems there. So this means the desert had reclaimed that area of Mecca, meaning it was abandoned if it wasn't there. But Mecca is the oldest city, the mother of all cities. Since the beginning, it's always been there, except it wasn't there. except there was nothing there, and no water, no well, so how come none of this is in the Quran? Why is there no explanation for this set of contradictions? These are questions that must be asked. I hope we'll get some answers. Of course we won't. What we will get in the comment sections is, you worship 3 gods. And what about Numbers 13, number 476? Because they cannot answer these questions, there will be deflection. But understand there are serious problems with this story. And of course, we already know there is serious plagiarism. Muhammad plagiarizes Abraham and does one better. So this is the standard Islamic practice. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.